So let's jump into the interface for deep visibility. The simplest way to get to the interface is to click on the magnifying glass on the main menu. Brings you right into the deep visibility screen. And the first thing I want you to notice is that the hierarchy has disappeared from the top of the screen. When you're in deep visibility, all of your searches are done at the highest possible permissions level that the user has. Right now I'm logged in as training admin, and training admin has access to all of the activities that exist inside, if I go back to Sentinels, the global training environment account. And so when I do searches in deep visibility, I'm going to look through the data lake and I'll be able to pull back any event that occurred on any machine in the training environment account. So therefore, which area you're in the hierarchy is not relevant in deep visibility. There are two major areas of deep visibility. There's the hunting and there's custom rules. Custom rules are star rules, and we'll go over those in another video. Hunting is where we're going to spend a lot of our time right now. You'll notice that there is a tab section here. We can create several new tabs. Right now, I believe the limit is 20 unique tabs. Each new tab, if we wanted to, we can click on the ellipsis to talk about new tabs. We can duplicate tabs that we've got. That can be useful if you want to take an existing query and modify it in such a way. That's useful if you'd like to take a existing query, modify it slightly, and run it again, but not mess with the one you've got going on now. We can also close the tab and close all other tabs. So if we wanted to get rid of all the other stuff, just click on all of the tabs and the tabs all disappear except for the one that you're on. It is possible to save and load queries. I have no saved queries at this moment, but you can, once you've created an extensive query, save that query and run it again in the future. When we're looking at the main query, there are some high-level functionalities that we can look at here. The first is events and process state. For the most part, process state has been deactivated. You can have it turned on if you so desire, but we are leaving it off by default for now. The difference between events and process state is events will pull back all events that we have in the data lake. Process state pulls back specific events having to do with only the processes. There are a few different ways we can query this, and it brings back slightly different information, but the problem is, no pun intended, it tends to be process intensive, and you can get the same results if you modify how you're searching through events that you can pretty much get through process state. The next, of course, is the time frame. The time frame goes from anywhere from the last hour all the way up to 14 days by default. Remember, at 14 days is the default amount of time that data can exist inside the data lake. Beyond 14 days does exist if you have appropriately purchased packages, at which point you can use custom range to choose whichever you'd like to see. Max results has to do with how many results are returned from whichever query you put in there. This is set at a relatively low number at the beginning to speed the queries along. If you are looking to get more than 2,000 events from a query, then you need to pump this up to the appropriate level. There are some things we'll talk about here when dealing with max results, because once you hit the max results level, we stop retrieving data. So that does mean that you may be looking at a subset of the possible records that exist if you hit the max results. Finally, at the top, we have priority and all fields. The difference here being, of course, priority fields are the ones that most people look at. They're kind of the greatest hits fields. And if we only load those, things do move a little more quickly. I would recommend strongly keeping it set to priority fields until you've reduced the number of results down to a relatively small number, and then pump it up to all fields to review all of the information in the selected number of fields that you have. Up in the right-hand side, there is a gear, and this gear does give you some options that you can utilize to modify how things work as well. The first thing you see here is what state you want the loading mode to be in. You can set it to priority fields, or you can set it to all fields by default. Again, like I say, I recommend leaving it at priority fields and then manually changing it to all fields later whenever you have limited your results. The next one down is time zone, and time zone is very important because this will allow you to choose between whatever the time zone is for your local browser or UTC. If you're working with other analysts from around the world, it is far easier if you set this to UTC. That way, when you work with those analysts, the time frames are all the same in your reports. Otherwise, people can get confused when someone from the East Coast starts talking about something that happened at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and then when the West Coast people take over, it all happened at 10 o'clock in the morning. So keep that in mind as you look at this. It can be very useful to set your time zone appropriately. So the next thing down here you see is the area where we will put our queries, and it says start hunting until you start typing something in here, and we will type in a simple query momentarily. On brand new tabs, you do have the basic events and other various helper queries. Let's type in a very simple query at this moment. Notice as I type the letters, immediately I get the autocomplete functionality. I only want to find name, so all I have to do is find name here. And then I want a very simple thing. I want to say exists. So I type the letter E, and as you can see, immediately the autocomplete pops up. And I can choose exists from the network, from the list. Name exists is about as simple as it gets. Basically what we're asking for is name is the name of any process, and we are asking whether or not it exists. So in other words, does the process name, is there a process name in the system? Which if there is, we'll get all the records for it. If I do this for the last 48 hours, I will hit my max results very easily, but we'll just start out with this very simple thing. A couple things to note. First of all, I got a green check mark, which means that my query is syntactically correct. If I were to start typing or do something strange, notice that I get a red X and I get a little blurb of underline. In this case, I put a comma in there, and if I highlight it, it'll actually tell me what it thinks is wrong. In this case, make sure there are no unnecessary characters at the end of the query. Well, that's exactly what we got. So if I get rid of the extra comma and I go back to a valid query. When you're finished typing the query, all you have to do is click on the purple search button. Or if you've got a Mac keyboard or a Windows keyboard, you can hold down the Control key and press return, and that will run your query. As you can see, I run that query. A lot of information immediately appears. I have a total of 2,000 events that were returned. I have 1 process, 4 cross-process, 2 indicator objects, 23 file objects, 15 network actions, 6 DNS results, 1,841 registry entries, and 108 module loads. Now, because we've hit the max results, there is a very good chance that we actually will have more events than are listed here. So this is a subset, which means that we might not actually see all of the different object types that actually exists for the last 48 hours for name exists. Obviously, this is a very broad query, and I'm utilizing it as an example just to bring back any data at all so that we can see what's going on. If we wanted to actually be more specific, we have to expand the query to be more specific. When the results get returned, we show 100 results at a time. We can choose less if we so desire. I generally keep it at 100 results. We can choose which columns we can look at, and we can adjust the columns that are here to choose which ones we want to see and which ones we don't. Obviously, if you just check off the ones that you'd like to see, source process time, and that column will appear at the end. It is also possible to move the columns around if you'd like the order if you'd like them to be in a different order. If, for example, you'd like to have event time at the beginning, bring this over here and drop it there. And now that will list first. Where these columns are and what columns are shown are actually stored per user. So when you log in again, any changes you make to the columns that are available and the columns order across the screen will remain the same for you. And if you make any changes, when you log back in, those changes will be kept. When we come back to the All Events tab, you'll notice that we can export the results. And I can simply export all the results as they are to a CSV file, or I can filter them and once they're filtered, I can actually export only the filtered results or all of them as you see fit. Finally, if I check off a few, notice that the Actions button appears. The Actions button allows you to do some specific things regarding the indicators that you have. Fetch logs talks about fetching the logs from the individual endpoint. Disconnect from network will take the endpoint off of the network. Mark threat and mark as suspicious have to do with identifying the storyline as either a threat or as a suspicious storyline. We'll talk more about those two when the time comes that we talk about containment. Now, name exists is not exactly the most complex query in the world, but we can save it. If I come up here to save new query, I can enter a name for this. I can click on save. And now simple query will appear as the query that we're looking at right now. If I go to something else or I go to a different tab, I can say load query, and here is simple query. I can choose that and it'll replace the query with name exists, and I can run it again. When you do save queries, be aware that they can be seen by others. So if you are going to make a habit of saving your queries, you may wish to come up with some sort of naming convention to make it easier for those of you who are searching for appropriate queries that other people have created.